ready to kick it off?
Wait for the live stream to kick in. It should be in.
Man, if I'd known it was going to be live stream, I would have cleaned my glasses.
Okay.
We're adjusting this.
We are all set to go when it goes.
Okay, I think we're ready to kick it off. I think we have a quorum, but Chris, do you want to start off?
Christopher Meekin.
Andrew Zachary.
William Teaton.
Jonathan Miller.
Clark Wilson.
Okay, so we have quorum here. The first item up is public comments. Are there any public comments this evening?
Nobody.
Okay, moving right along. Next up is the consent agenda. This is for the approval of the minutes from the October 1st, 2019 meeting. They were circulated to us prior. Did anyone have any comments? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Move to approve the draft of the minutes dated October 1st, or for the October 1st, 2019 meeting.
Second.
Second. Vote? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We have the minutes approved. Up next, we're moving on to presentations. Looks like we have a few of these this evening, starting with a report from AWR. Is AWR here to? Oh, there you go. Awesome.
Do you want me to pass some physical copies around as well, or?
Sure. I think maybe if you could just speak to, we had a really great meeting with AWR and city staff and the engineer, and we have gotten a lot of complaints recently about high water bills and talked about the possibility of water in the lines. If you could speak to that.
Air.
Sorry. Water.
We got
yeah,
you.
so I
We
hope
got
we
you.
have water in the lines. Air in the lines, and then we'll move on to the other opportunities you have suggested for us, and then that's on your agenda tonight.
Well, there's been some, my name's Hal Lanham, by the way. I'm the president of AWR Services. My son Brett, he does most of the work. So, in regards to air in the lines, we have spoken to a couple of meter experts that have been in the business 25 years and so forth. It is possible to move these meters with enough air in the system. It's also possible to remove the air from the system using air relief valves. So we were talking with your engineer about how we might go about that, and air tends to end up in the high points in the system. It will work its way through the system and come up into the high points. At those high points, you can install some air relief and help that. I couldn't get a definitive answer from either of these people that I talked to that, yes, we've seen a case in which that's happened. But you have a very unusual situation here in the summer. It happens every summer, I think. And so some indication that it may be causing some issues with high water bills within the system. So our recommendation to you would be to have your engineer take a look at the very highest points in the system, and let's install some air relief valve and see what that does for us. Not terribly expensive to do that, and I think that would be a good test case to find out if we do have that much air in the system. When you install an air relief valve in that system, you'll be able to actually hear that air coming out. So if we have a large amount of air coming in, which you would have in a very large line, that air would probably be dissolved in the flow itself. It would come out in your system. So that's what we think is the right thing to do. We have inquired the American Water Works Association. They have case studies to see if they have anything like this. So we'll see how they respond to that. They're not really very fast in their response, but they do have good information. So we'll certainly try to take a look at that. So I think right now your engineer is the best source to relieve that. Maybe let's install a couple of air relief valves in the highest points. Let's see what happens. Okay. Any questions for you?
Have y'all ever had experience with this before, or had any other similar circumstances?
No, we haven't, and I've been in the business 30 years. I've not seen that. I've seen a lot of air in the system, and when you have air in the system, typically when a customer opens their faucet, you can see it in the water. It makes it cloudy and milky looking. When you put the glass on the counter, for example, let it sit for a little bit, clears right up. So we see this after we have a repair. We do get some air in the systems, and we'll flush as much as we can. but we still have that air in the system. Takes a little while for it to work out. But I've never seen it where it was changing meter readings. But you know, you have a large flow coming into your system from City of Austin, possible they're getting air in there somewhere. So I realize the air relief is solving their problem for them, but trying to get the City of Austin to solve it's probably not very feasible and would be difficult to do. So that's kind of our response, Amber. Amber contacted us about this, and that's kind of where we are.
Are there any known downsides to doing this?
Downside to the air relief valves? No, sir, they're not. If there's any air in the system, it releases it. If there's not, they stay closed. So,
And
yeah.
approximate cost per unit?
Depends on the size of the line and how big these are. You know, we're talking about an installation of probably $2,500, $3,500, something like that. So it's not very expensive to do it. We need to find a line that's easy to access. We don't have access problems, et cetera. But we could do that, I think, you know, with the help of the engineer.
And how long do they last?
They're actually a pretty long life. They used to be longer before some of them were made in China. But, you know, they're a good at least 15-year piece of equipment, and maybe longer. Just depends on the corrosiveness of the water itself. So,
Thank you.
yeah, sure.
You know, one of the roles we play is kind of water appeals and high water bills. They come and talk to us. So I'm just thinking back to a few we've had over the past few months. If, let's say there was air coming through and we sent off meters to be checked for accuracy, would that catch this or no? My guess is it probably wouldn't. It would come back showing us accurate all the time.
They're gonna come back accurate. That's right. You know, when you test a meter, somewhere between 98 and 101 is considered the accuracy range for a positive displacement or turbine meter, which is what you have. And so they just show to be accurate. You put them back in the ground, same thing would occur again. So that's something you should do. I mean, the homeowner himself, you got to do something, right? And so you want to pull that meter out, install a new one, have this one checked, send them the certification that the meter was okay. But then they're still stuck with a high water bill if this air is really causing that problem.
That's
Are
helpful.
there
Good to know.
any other benefits or concerns around installing air release valves in systems, and why wouldn't it have been considered earlier than now?
Yeah, so air relief valves are really intended to prevent what's called water hammer effect. Water hammers, when you turn on water and it pulses down through the system, can damage your system, separate joints, and damage pumps, you know, when it arrives. That helps to relieve some of that pressure and so forth. And it keeps the water from being clear, you know, makes the water clear so you don't have this air coming out. When you do a repair, you turn that system back on and have this air in there, you can literally hear that air blowing through the faucet. It'll be spitting and so forth, and all of a sudden it clear. You get a stream, but it has air in it. It's just not very attractive. There's nothing unsafe about it, but homeowners get concerned about it because it looks like it has debris in it or something. It looks like it's milky, and it's really just air in there. So we do some fairly significant flushing when we do a repair to keep that down, because we know if we don't, we're just going to have a lot of phone calls and people are going to be unhappy. Within about 3 days, 2 or 3 days, it goes away.
Nothing?
Do we need a motion?
No, I just wanted to report on this one. And then the next item is the electronic meters feasibility test.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
The electronic meters feasibility test. You have a proposal in your packet, and you'll be asked to make a recommendation to the city council about whether you would like to do that. But I'd like to have Hal and Brett talk about electronic meters, and then also Mayor Dyson would like to also speak to the electronic meters.
Yeah, I'll do a brief introduction, and then Brett's ex-Apple and has been working actually with Badger, so he's our technology guy. From my standpoint, I wish we had had these meters over the last 25 or 30 years. We always have high water bills. People are complaining about them, or if they have a leak, and you've got to go in and do some sort of adjustment and so forth. The customer is not particularly happy because you're not going to adjust all of that off. So fast forward to where we are today with these electronic meters. We've been monitoring these things now for about 10 years, and they've come down significantly in price so that it's feasible for a system to put them in. We've selected the Badger company because it's been in business 75 years, This is a 20-year warranty on these meters and a 10-year and then 10-year prorated warranty on the battery system. So you've got to have a company that's going to be there, you know, when you need that warranty 10 years out or 15 years out. There are some other meters on the market. They've had kind of mixed results out there. We've been monitoring that to see if there might be another source for meters out there that might be as good as Badger, but we've been using Badger meters for many years, and so bottom line, we have about 1,500 of these meters in the ground right now. Some of them have been as long as 5 years, Brett?
About 3.
About 3 years, okay. So we don't have, you know, a long-term history with them. We've not had many problems with them. These meters, and I'll let Brett describe it further, but they have the ability to read the consumption every 15 minutes, to send information through the cell system at night as a little burst of data, and it's stored in the cloud so that when you take your City of Austin bill, it was read on this date, you can draw that information down and have a direct comparison. One of the issues you have now is when we read or when the city reads and when the City of Austin reads are different. We're trying to compare those. You want to end up with what's called the water loss. In other words, city sells you this much water, you bill out this much water. If there's a difference, that's your water loss, and it's money lost. So we want those to be as close as we can together. These meters read to very low flow, whereas the current meters do not. If you just crack a hydrant, for example, with not much water coming out, your meter's probably not going to move. But these meters, it will immediately register that water. So you'll pick up some extra revenue there. But the real value of these meters, when it gets right down to it, is the data that you have for the customer. These customers can be on what's called eye on water. They can actually look at their actual consumption. There's a graph, shows them how many gallons are consuming and the time and so forth. And you can see, here's the irrigation system on, here's it on over here, or here's a pool fill that comes on. And so they can take a look at their consumption and make their own adjustments to bring their bill down. When they call us, from our standpoint, we have the ability to talk to them about here's what's really happening at your home, and most of them they're either on the Eye on Water system on their computer or their phone, or once they talk to us, they get on that system and they take a look at it. It also has a leak alert system on it, so that if you have a constant flow, and it remembers the history, has a constant flow, sends you a leak alert, instead of us reading the meter 30 days later or 20 days later after that leak has really become big and expensive and so forth. Bad for the customer, you know, bad for the city. So there's also no meter reader involved, so there's no more chance of mistakes being made by meter readers, and that's no reflection on meter readers. I think you have good meter readers here, but they're human, and they're trying to read these meters out there. There's spiders and dirt and, you know, everything else inside those boxes. It's hard to do. So you won't have any of those people there. You know, they're pretty much a direct replacement for the meters that are in the ground. If the meter's been in there a long time, we find sometimes we have to rework some of the piping just because it's corroded and bad. But in general, you can take the old meter out and put this meter in. It does have a transponder unit that sits on top of the meter itself. So we're awfully impressed with these meters, and reliability is good. Badger's support's good. The actual programmer for Badger is now in San Marcos, and he and Brett have done quite a bit of work with these meters and programming. So, you know, I don't have anything bad to report to you about them. The meters were mechanical being read, then we had drive-by meters, and now we have meters that are sending information through the cell system. And I'm pretty impressed with what's going on out there. Comments you want to make, Brett? If you want to talk technical, he can do that for you.
Let's say we go through and we put in the 15 Badger meters.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And let's say 3 months later we don't like Badger's performance. Are those meters, could we hire someone like Fathom or someone else in this industry to do the same servicing, or are those meters just Badger meters? Are we stuck with Badger after we install them, or do we have flexibility to use other vendors to service them?
We actually, yeah.
Are you talking about the data that comes from the meters?
Yeah,
No.
so I'm assuming it's,
Aggregating that data?
or there's two steps. We have to buy the meter, and then we're also having to pay a monthly fee to a service provider for this,
Yes.
for the subscription. Is that,
Badger's got it all packaged up.
okay?
Yeah.
But if we don't like Badger and we install their meters, are we stuck with Badger?
No, in fact, these meters, is proposal to have those in 120 days, right?
Yeah, for 4 months.
They'll be in there 120 days. At the end of that time, you will either pull them out if you don't want them, or you can put them in and begin to have a program. Couple of ways to do it. You can just begin replacing your meters out there that are over 1 million gallons with these meters, or you could do a system-wide approach, and we can do some lease purchasing for you. But I know I talked with the mayor earlier in here. He's done made some calculations. No, please do.
Did that answer your question?
Or, I mean, it's, my question, it sounds like it's not
Not
like.
necessarily, but I've got some, I think, something that might
Okay.
help you there. So guys, these are rough numbers, but I think as soon as we were discussing this in the city, my head immediately went to, what does this look like as far as kind of cost of ownership with what we have versus an upgrade? And to put some base numbers to it, we spend roughly $18,000, this is a conservative number, $18,300 annually to have our meters read. That is what we pay city employees to go out for these time periods every month. It's an $18,300 burn. By comparison, a digital meter, you don't need manual reading. You don't have anybody out in the field doing this. You've freed up their time, so we don't even have to talk about opportunity cost of freeing up the staff time. But you can talk about they have a digital software expense attached to it every month at $1.89. This is for Badger, but presume that this model would be for any digital meter. They would have some kind of software monthly bill attached to it. In this instance, it's $1.89 per meter. That works out to about $13,600 annual expense. So immediately you've got a cost savings of $5,000 every year for digital over manual or analog rather, just by taking the person out of the job. To emphasize that as well, one of the hardest things that Jackie Bob was doing while here at the city, one of the biggest strains on his health, was quite literally being out in the field, reading these meters in the heat of summer. So just, there's a ton of intangibles that go along with that number. As far as longevity of an analog versus a digital, these digitals, as was noted, they've got a 20-year limited warranty, full warranty for 10 years, and then it's prorated for the following 10. What I did anyway, is tacked on 15 years as a lifespan, say, for that meter versus what's the average lifespan of what should be the average lifespan of an analog meter if we were replacing them as we should be, which in truth we haven't. We can get into that in just a second as well. But the analog meter is going to have a lifespan of roughly around 9 years versus 15 roughly for these digital, right? Now I'm going to put an asterisk by the 15 years as well, because we haven't been using digital meters long enough to know whether they actually hold up for 15 years. So just as a caveat. If you figure out how much that replacement cost ends up being, you start talking about analog meters running you roughly $28,000 on a conservative side every year. That's how much it costs us as a city, thinking that we're going to have to replace these every 9 years, plus your labor to get people out there to read them. By comparison, a digital meter with a 15-year lifespan and some level of monthly software service cost is going to run you about $22,500. So you start talking about recouping your overall cost over the course of a few years, right? Just from that alone, makes sense. Where we are as a city right now, we're staring down the barrel of the need to replace 406 meters. 406 meters have outlived their 1 million gallon suggested lifespan, I suppose. We have a lot, actually, of meters that are over 10 million gallons.
Oh, wow.
So what you start talking about there is a loss of accuracy with accounting for the gallons that are actually going through your meter. That accounts for real dollars, bless you, lost on behalf of the city. So bringing in digital, even over that 15-year time span, that turbine analog meter is going to lose a level of accuracy incrementally. It may start as pennies, may end up as dollars before you end up replacing it. You don't have that loss of accuracy over the course of the time span for your digital meter. So you start talking about a more realistic understanding of your actual water usage, and thereby recapturing what the city actually is potentially right now losing in funds. Put it in perspective for you, we're staring down the barrel right now, $63,357.50 is the cost to replace the meters. If we replace the analog meters that are out right now with new analog meters, which we should do, $36,357. That does not include labor for replacement. If we replaced those same meters with Badger meters, it would cost us $107,000. Again, no labor. No labor. From what I understand from AWR, I'm going solely on AWR's suggestion and information on this. But as you just heard, it doesn't seem to be much of a cost differential with labor. So replacing an analog should be fairly akin labor cost-wise to putting in digital.
It seems, I'm not experienced in this industry at all, but it seems like this would be similar like an alarm system too. If we're willing to commit to them for a fixed year service and use their SaaS for 10 to 15 years, it seems like they would be able to discount the front end. So
Yeah,
give
so
us
if
such a free meters or something like that.
If I could boil it down just very simply for you, my recommendation, my personal recommendation, is that as a city, we switch over to digital. My suggestion to this body is to really not necessarily discuss whether we want to stay analog or go digital, but more, do we want to go with AWR's proposal to put Badger meters in, or do we want to explore, there's any number of other service providers in this industry. Do we want to take a look at that? And if the answer to that is yes, then I would also ask you to try to put your heads together to figure out a process through which we would go about vetting or determining what other system we're going to use. So the proposal that we have with AWR is Badger. To answer your question, I think the question that you were asking, if we put Badger meters in and 5 years down the road, we do a wholesale switch to Badger, and 5 years down the road, Badger's not what we wanted it to be, no, we couldn't just co-opt new software and put on there, right? It's a full package deal. This is our hardware, this is our software that's attached to it. So you'd have to go back in, then this is,
Yeah, so they aren't universal.
That's
They're
right.
company-specific meters.
That's right. So, and I don't know, again, like I haven't done a level of research to know whether there are universal meters out there, and if there are, there's a market for, the service provider that doesn't provide, that puts their service onto a universal meter.
Yeah, my initial thoughts are, I think it makes sense to pursue digital. Seems like it makes sense, but I feel like it's a long-term investment by the city, and we need to be prudent on how we go about making sure we make the right selection on provider and technology.
I would very much agree there, and I just talked about numbers.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, there's a lot more going into a community than just the dollars, right? And at the end of the day, you're not breaking the bank on $5,000-$6,000 in savings every year. The bigger upside to us as a community is a greater level of understanding that we can now afford our community and our individual residents and even our commercial property owners and where their water goes, right? There's a lot of discussion frequently in our communities about water conservation. Whether we want to talk in terms of water conservation or just intelligent water use, knowing that I'm taking this gallon out, and I have an understanding that this gallon costs money, and there is an impact, whether it be social, environmental, financial, to me using this water, right? Now you've just empowered your entire community to have that understanding, make really intelligent decisions as to how much water they want to put on their lawn, how frequently do they want to fill their pool, do they even want a pool, right? We can now have these types of conversations. Maybe we take shorter showers, maybe we don't let a little more conscientious on letting the water run when we're brushing our teeth, sort of thing. We can literally watch it on your phone, your tablet, and then when it comes down to having discussions, our relationships between the community and the city, and even the city service providers, now we can have pretty intelligent conversations going forward, which hopefully brings blood pressure down on either side of that conversation. So that's, aside from the dollars and cents, I think there's a lot of upside in those regards.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I feel like this is somewhat of a competitive market, and I think the city would benefit by making their, one, doing diligence to make sure we know what the options are. Two, making sure we can create competition between the providers of this service to make sure we get the best deal. Because I mean, it's a 15-year decision, right? I mean, if we're thinking you have 15-year warranty, we're buying the meters and the.
And so to that point, what AWR has offered with Badger is kind of a trial program where they would pick 15 homes to install these meters. We have not negotiated the best deal. I think there's still room that AWR is going to cut us for, putting you on the spot. But what they've agreed to now is to buy back the meters if it's not something we wanted to go forward with. So what the city would be on the hook for during this trial program would be to test the 15 meters at a cost of labor plus the software during this time frame.
My only concern with that approach, I feel like it's like an interior decorator. Like, you come here, you put the rug in, you put the couch in, you walk in, you're like, man, this is awesome. And you kind of get swayed right away without making sure you've done the diligence on the front end.
The huge risk is they all fail in year 7. And I don't think a 120-day test gets you there. And I don't know that there's any community we could go look at. So, I'm putting you in a terrible position.
No, it's not a terrible position at all. I like that we're having this conversation. It's the right conversation to be having. You're absolutely right. That is a risk. One of the ways that that Badger, and what we would do is, if we go and vet other companies in the same sphere, make sure that they're offering something similar. Badger actually provides a warranty on all of their equipment, full replacement warranty for 10 years, and then it's prorated for the next 10 after that.
We've all been in a situation where they never can get it right, and even though you have a warranty and it's
sure,
and all the cities, let's assume all these cities they put it in, and that is a 1% chance of that, but that's just the first fear that comes, because if we.
And I don't disagree with any of that. It's certainly valid to see that as a concern. I'm going to offer that. For me personally, I never think a fear of a possibility is necessarily a good excuse not to undertake a challenge.
The upside is tremendous, no question, question.
And the short answer ends up being, if in year 7 we realize that we've made a $107,000 mistake, we'll have to replace it with a $63,000 mistake or repair. But I would also offer that in year 7. Your analog meters that we've just replaced for $63,000 are going to need replacing again the following year, right?
Here's the question. Can we run parallel paths without giving up leverage over who we choose?
In truth, there's nothing exclusive in this. You could check these 15 meters, and if we found 4 other companies that were willing to run similar programs, you could literally have them installed at the same time and run a real-time comparison on which company seems to fit the bill better. The difficulty is going to be finding the residents that want to be your guinea pigs, I would assume. I don't know. You can try my house. Yeah. There you go. So maybe it's not so difficult.
Do y'all have experience with them? I'm just throwing out. I know there's like Fathom in town, which I think is a similar type of software. I know Badger's it sounds like they've been around for a long time. They've only been doing probably the digital for X number of years. So it's hard for me just to think immediately that Badger, since they've been around for 75 years, means they're best positioned to run digital meters versus someone who I just feel like there's a little disconnect there. Not that they aren't the best, but I think we need to make sure we pick the right person since we're stuck with them.
I completely agree. Yeah, you don't want to get saddled with the wrong folks. And I don't disagree. I would never disagree with doing a level of due diligence.
Would you like Chris to make some comments, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, and I think our water council
Okay.
had something to throw in there.
Hi, I'm Randy Wilburn. I'm going to talk to you later about some other things going on, but I also am counsel for Water District 10. And Water District 10 went through this process for the last couple of years. And what they ended up doing is they decided to go with the Badger meters. They're replacing all 3,000 meters right now within that district. And I think it's real important, this responsiveness to your customers. I think it's the key point, because what we found was people say, we never use that much water, you're just estimating. This eliminates all those questions. And a lot of times they'd say, my irrigation system's not on. And then you can go and it says, well, it looks like it comes on at 2 o'clock here, it runs to 3, it comes back on at 5, runs to 6. You have it set to come on 10 times during the day. Obviously there's an error in the way you set up your system, and they can go back and fix that. And then this thing about the leak detection. Whether the flapper valve staying open on the toilet or if there's some major problem, you're going to see this constant flow. And so you can allow the homeowner to take care of that issue early. So that's my only thing I had to say. And I would suggest, if y'all want to go down this road, you talk to some of the other districts that have gone through this, like District 10 and there's others, and learn from their experience and gain something from that, I hope.
Yeah. No,
Absolutely, this is worth a field trip.
And I think hearing more from AWR would be great. And I think, and I'm not speaking for the commission, but I think digital sounds like something we need to pursue. I think we should think of the strategy for doing it.
I know one of the things that's different between different companies is some use cell and some use radio. And for District 10, with the terrain out there, you know, being cell is better than the radio.
I was just going to say to you, we've made our own selection,
Yeah.
And there certainly are some other companies out there. We did a fairly extensive review of those companies and how those meters perform by calling the entities that had them. But bottom line for us, this is a Badger test package of 15 meters. You really don't have any obligation here. At the end of the time, you can say, we'd like those removed, and we'll come remove the meters, and that's the end of the discussion. If you like what's going on, then we would move forward with some kind of proposal. In the meantime, if you wanted to take a look at some other groups, it'd be fine with us. So again, it's just a little test package they do. I will tell you that we haven't installed any test packages yet that they haven't proceeded with that. But that doesn't mean you couldn't find someone else out there. So bottom line, it's a no-risk deal, but certainly we'll acquiesce to your wishes. So.
Or have you all used anyone else? Any of the other providers? Have you all solely used Badger?
We have direct experience with Badger. We have relationships with a number of other districts, and we have heard feedback on these various meters, and in fact have monitored some pilot test programs that were done by other meter companies around the Austin area. Some performed fairly well. Some did not perform well at all. We have also continued to grow as an organization, and one of the clients, for instance, we took on had converted to some of these more cost-effective meters that looked really great on paper, but it was a fairly new company, and they have replaced over 75% of those meters due to mechanical failures and things in manufacturing and stuff like that. What really stuck us with Badger is not only have we used Badger a long time and we have a very good relationship with them, the RMA process, or the process that we go through when we do have problems with Badger, is the most seamless that we've experienced with, frankly, pretty much any vendor that we have that's of a size that Badger is. And the reason why I say that is because my background at Apple, when you had issues with product and you're trying to exchange that product so that the customer's downtime is the lowest, you have to have a really good logistics system in place in order to make all that happen. And our RMA center is in San Marcos, and so I can have replacement meters in my hands the same day if it's an emergency. And I can't say that about a number of other suppliers if their logistics and supply chain management is that well defined. It's just because Badger is a manufacturer, but they also have a fairly large distribution network. So certainly not trying to say that Badger is your only option out there, but I would encourage you actually to look at some of the other meters that are out there, because this is a rapidly expanding area of the market. But I do think that Badger's work, which really began with a system called Orion almost 15 years ago, they had what was called AMR, which is a drive-by pickup that they developed off of what they called a tap reed. It was like a little wand that they could touch the reed. Then we got to RF wireless reeds, which was the drive-by. Then you got to AMI, which was the meters could send a signal to a collection station that then was connected to the internet. But now cellular is so the saturation of most areas is pretty good, especially for like text messages and small data. You might not be able to make a phone call, which requires a lot more audio bandwidth, but you could send a text message of data. And so that's one other thing that Badger's agreed to do as a part of this, if you'd like for them to do that, is a propagation study to tell you, will a cellular-based solution be effective for your community? Because we know you do have some areas where cellular is not the best.
One of our greatest concerns was some of these clients we've had for over 20 years. Our Barton Creek client, for example, is that way. We wanted to recommend a meter to them that we knew the company would be there if they needed warranty on those systems. If Badger had to change out every meter in your system, they would do it. So we worried about some of these smaller companies that are startup groups and offering better prices and so forth. Would they be there when we needed them for warranty out there? So, 20 years is a long time. So anyway, bottom line is that was our choice, and we're happy to do a test package for you. You can take a look at it and see what you think.
Yeah, and I trust y'all's evaluation. I'm kind of new to the meter region. Just feel like we need to at least put some thought into it.
Frankly, I support the transition to digital for many things, including water bills, just so we have better data around our water usage, that is on a customer level as well as on a city or organizational level. Frankly, I'm also supportive of moving forward with this trial and also looking at what else is in the market. I don't think that running this trial in particular is saying that we are now entirely tied to Badger, and ultimately we may decide that that's the right choice for us. But I see no reason why not to get the ball rolling and get something installed and get some information, understand how this is all going to work. And during that, we can say, hey, you know what? We saw this other thing over here, and the information we were getting doesn't provide us enough of what I think we need to see. And the best way to learn what information you're going to want is to start getting it and seeing what deficiencies there may or may not be. And so whether that means having Badger come here and talk to us about the actual system and showing us what the dashboards look like, or providing us with the reports and showing us how the app works and what the customer level information is and what the city level, maybe happy to do that too. But I think given that there's going to be a number of meters changed anyway over the next, whether that's immediate or 12 months, I see no reason why to continue waiting. If we're going to put 15 meters in, the mistake here is $7,500 today and not $107,000 yet. So I'm willing to make a motion just to move forward with this, but I'm also happy to wait if others want to wait and try something else. So
If you make the motion, I would second it. So I actually think that.
Let me ask, not knowing very much about meters at all, the impeller part, that's been around for a long, long time, right?
Yes.
And
Turbine.
that's the very expensive part that breaks. And then there's a sensor that tells something how fast it's spinning.
Right.
And if the sensor fails, that's not that big a deal as much as this thing fails. It seems like the bearings or the seals or that. But if this thing fails, 2 bolts, pop another one on.
True. What you're talking about is, we call it the paddle wheel. And it's just a unit that moves inside the meter, and it's just mechanical. And on top, what you're talking about that could fail is the register. And right now, yours are analog registers, so they just have a little turn dial that as that meter moves, it turns the little gear mechanism like a pocket watch and turns the dial. Your electronic meters have no moving parts, and they're based off of a kind of a shrinking of technology. So ultrasonic meter reading has been around a long time for master meters, big meters that are 8+ inches in size, all the way up to 48 inches for huge intake lines for big cities and things like that. They've shrunk that technology now, where that's the technology that's in these small meters. It's the same units. There's no moving parts, and as long as the pipe is filled with water, it's just a small electrical signal that the latency or the lag for that signal to move between the 2 points is how it measures the water.
The quality risk doesn't strike me as large if they've been making this part for a long time.
I agree with you. The ultrasonic type of technology is fairly simple in terms of its internal workings, and then that unit itself you could put in the ground, and they've actually made Badger E-Series meters for some time, and they worked with the Orion systems and other things they had before. It's the cellular transponder and the integration into the whole cloud network that's a lot newer, and that they've made more efficient, so it's more cost effective. But I hope that answers your question.
Exactly answered the question.
Does the air in the water line impact this type of meter reading?
It would impact these meters, because so in order for the meter to function and not give you a tamper alarm, it has to be filled with water. If the meter the meter tube is not filled with water after it's been activated, you get a tamper alarm because it can't accurately read the water.
To your question, this was my immediate misunderstanding. You wouldn't get a false reading. You get a
Off
tamper.
of these electronic ones,
That's
correct. Yes, sir.
So basically, you wouldn't have air running through your system that would trigger your meter.
Right, it doesn't work, so you know something's wrong,
That's right.
but you're not
Right.
getting necessarily
Yeah,
billed.
it might identify for us where some of if there are air issues that are very serious, would probably identify those.
In fact,
for us.
you may want to pick some of those areas for your pilot if you move forward with the pilot.
And perhaps some
I
of
think
the-
Amber and I talked about, and we had a dispersion, I think, of the high water bill, a little map up here, that we had planned on putting those meters in those locations, right? Kind of where those were. I mean, they could be put anywhere, but we had talked about putting those in the high use areas where the complaints were.
Well, y'all been really informed. I really do appreciate everything. And I agree with everything Jonathan said. And as long as I think if we can do something to go talk to, was it District 10, or just kind of parallel, consider some of these alternatives. But I mean, I think it makes sense. I think the program makes sense to get started, just to start seeing how it works.
So what type of capabilities would we need at the city for this type of system?
Well, currently,
'Cause
we
it sounds like
actually,
a whole different skill set than what we're used to having.
yeah, so, you may or may not know, AWR actually operates your wastewater system. Our operators do that. We also assist your licensed water operators here in construction and repair, especially when they need backup and support or heavy construction. And so we actually do the billing from AWR for the city. Currently, we use a telephone system or phone, get those meter readings, and then they bring those, we take those to the office, download them into our billing system, and we send out the bills. We collect the money and deposit in your bank account. So the only real difference here is the fact that we'd be drawing those meter readings down from the cloud.
No. Let's say that electronics failed on a meter at 310 Nixon. We have a bunch of people who are real good at plumbing, but maybe not as good at electrical engineering or computer support at the city level. Capable, wonderful people, but that's not just the skill set that
Sure.
they've had in the
They would
What
just,
do we need here?
yes, so they would just call us and say, we've got a problem with this meter. We'd send someone out. If it's a failure of any component in the system, Badger will just send us a new one. We'll put it in at no cost to the city. So our technicians.
So we
would do
wouldn't
that.
be maintaining these.
You would not.
Okay.
That's correct. probably would get the phone call about it.
Yes, we I said we from this.
We wouldn't be, it's covered under our current contract with AWR.
What is the battery life on these? Is it 10 years or is it?
Well,
20 years.
the warranty on the batteries is 10 years, full guarantee, 100%, and after 10 years, prorated on the next 10 years.
So it retains its charge, you don't have to recharge them or anything?
No, and it makes a big difference as to how often you read the meter, right? So if you set this to read every 5 minutes, that battery life's gonna be less. We typically do it 15, is that right?
We have our other meters set at 1 hour reads and a once a day check-in. And so you have 24 reads in a day for every hour, and then it checks in at night once a day with a pulse. That's what Badger considers the optimal program for the system. We do have one client where we're actually pretty excited. It's a fairly new project. We've actually converted their master meters and their residential meters all to electronic, and because they had a significant concern regarding water loss, and this has provided us a tremendous amount of visibility. But in that system, we have set those meters to read every 15 minutes and check in 4 times a day. And so you get 15-minute increments, but you are actually getting updates throughout each day on
When he
that
says
consumption.
check in, he means that meter's sending data to the cloud. But I don't think, we wouldn't recommend that to you. We don't think that's necessary to do that. This district has had issues with their supplier, and so they want more data.
But, so, can I assume then that if we were fully integrated in that way, you could set it for, every hour with 1 check-in, and then say there was some concern about maybe we wanted to do kind of an audit of sorts. We could go back and set that system for 15 minutes with 4 check-ins a day.
I believe so. I would
So
need,
you can kind of tweak that system as you go forward and then say, okay, we've got our data for our audit, keep everybody honest, if you will. Now we can go back to preserving battery life to the optimized schedule.
to give you the most honest answer, I don't know, 100%. I believe you can, but I'd like to check with Alan. He actually wrote some of the program to confirm, but I'm happy to let you know.
Some level of auditing ability. We've had a lot of concern, obviously, about water loss in our in our city. I think that would go a long way for us. Some level of
Well, I know for sure we've gone in and modified existing programming on meters in the ground to read more frequently. I just haven't done it in the reverse. And so I want to confirm with him, if we make those changes, I can go back.
And would we be approving this today, or are we approving this to go to city council to approve this?
You're making a recommendation to city council.
May I ask, when you say once an hour reading, every hour it sees exactly how fast the paddle wheel's going?
There's no paddle.
Well, there's no wheel anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why it literally, the unit just turns on its pulse to check between the 2 reads, and it takes a new read off the meter. And so if, let's say at hour 1, you had used 0 gallons, and then by hour 2, you had used 150 gallons. Well, as soon as it takes that read and it says 150, it adds that to its built-in memory in the unit. But then it stacks that up for 24 reads in one day, once every hour. Then at night, during low data periods, it sends all that as one pulse for the previous day's reads.
So without a paddle wheel, it has an electronic pulse that measures how much water goes by.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We could also put each of you on Island Water, so you could see these meters and see what's going on with them. We'd need permission from the homeowner, but we would talk to them about it. So test meter, there's what we're doing. We'll put them on Island Water. We can put you on Island Water also. You can see the data and the information coming in. It's really pretty impressive when you see it. So,
Just another clarification question to make sure that I understand. If you have it testing on the hour every hour, but every half hour I run the water for 10 minutes, and then I turn everything off, and you're only testing every hour, because there's not a mechanical thing that spins and catches it, is it still gonna catch all that water usage for the Thames?
Oh, yes, it's,
Okay.
it's still, so
I assumed it
your,
would, I just didn't
your,
understand the tech.
what we would call your local register, the register on the meter that's in the ground, is picking up any movement that's going through that meter, whether it's forward or backward. The meter will actually read everything. And so if it gets a reverse read, it's gonna send you an alert and say, hey, I've got a reverse flow. But then the pulses that we're talking about is when it takes that data to prepare it to go into the cloud network, so that you can graph that data and use it to monitor.
Yeah, the meter actually has a register on it. You can see-
Continuous
yeah, you can see what-
metering, but you're only getting 24 data points.
Yeah, and I apologize, the
day.
way I described it maybe
Nope,
kind of
that's quite
led
all
to
right.
some
No,
confusion.
that makes sense
so.
now.
It's better than monthly.
He's just over here trying to figure out how to cheat the system.
Water between the hour.
Seems so obvious. I had to clarify that real quick. Thank you. Well, I'll make a motion that we make a recommendation to City Council to approve the electronic water meeting testing program here.
I would second that motion.
It just seems so short a period.
I think it's fine if we can pursue, if we recommend they also pursue other offers. I mean, I think what Jonathan said earlier was very helpful, is that I have no experience with this, so the sooner we can start getting direct first-hand experience, it'll, one, let us know how Badger's doing, at the same time, it'll give us a better framework for critiquing other people's evaluating the other offers. So if they're basically gonna give it to us for free almost to test for 120 days, I don't really see any risk in.
Well, actually, the only question I have is, so this is 4 months, beginning, when would be the earliest install?
Probably 60 days before we'd have the meter.
So beginning of the year.
60 is holidays.
So
right now,
figure-
you know.
I'm trying to figure out which months we're gonna be actually recording.
Well, in some ways, it's actually, those are the low flow months.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see, there are two things about it. One, it would be interesting to see all those people for whom we currently read zero, who actually probably aren't zero. And the second would be, in the summertime, you get all these large bills. So in a way, it would be more effective to do a study. I'm not sure which is more effective to do the study.
Well, you would get even more accurate reads with your low flow. That's one thing, we haven't necessarily gotten into the performance characteristics between mechanical and ultrasonic, but your mechanical meter reads accurately down to about a half a gallon a minute. Less than about a half gallon a minute, there's not enough flow to consistently move the mechanism, the paddle wheel. And an ultrasonic meter, as long as that tube's filled with water, 1/100th of a gallon could shift in that tube and it would sense it.
I understand that. That's why, well, there are conflicting views about, I have a conflicting opinion about which way would be better. To see what the large flow rates are like and see how accurate we really are under real life conditions. And the other is do it in the winter when there's low flow rates and see what happens to the people who think they have zero bills and
If
really
I
don't.
could just add one more point to that, we do winter, averaging,
Right.
right? So, in truth, considering that that's gonna set somebody's average for the year, I think it might actually be a little more prudent for us to undertake installation of a test after the winter averaging is done.
Okay.
That's, I mean, just
Might
my 2
increase
cents.
your
Yes.
average.
Understood.
Yeah, I feel like you're gonna ask 15 folks to put really accurate meters on during a time when we're setting your pricing for the rest of the year. I mean, I raise my hand for putting meter on just as long as you don't do it during that time. Right?
Well, I'd love to, I really want to get our feet moving. This is exciting. We'd like to get going, but it would be, I think, optimal to have some of each, high and low. But I don't want to wait till April to start.
Sure, right.
Well, and in reality, by the time we select 15 neighbors and get them on Ion Water and get y'all on Ion Water, I mean, we might be out of the winter averaging period
Yeah.
by the time.
Or at least really close to being out of it.
Sure.
And I'll still volunteer my.
We already got 3, so you're done. You're in
All
good shape.
right. Okay.
Whole committee's on.
That's right. I like it.
I do think that would be critically important too, when we start to figure out how we select the folks to sure that the people that are willing to participate in the test are also willing to share that data with the city. Otherwise, I mean, how are we supposed to really make an effective decision?
Public, not just with the city, but
Sure.
yeah,
Which is,
all of
well,
neighbors.
presumably, if it landed in the city's hands, anybody can make public information requests.
It has to come to the city.
Yeah, you're gonna get all the data anyway.
They're built.
It's our, it's the city's data that we're, but
Fair point.
but now customers can see it whenever they want.
Well, so, and I
Right.
mean, in kind of in real time, right? That was what you were mentioning, so that we could actually, we could sit here and instead of hitting it, it's just seeing the end report, which was what the city would be entitled to, we could actually monitor it, in real time as any of these other folks could monitor in real time.
And I mean, I think speaking of District 10 would be helpful too. I mean, I assume if they put a lot of thought into this, they probably went through a big process evaluating various options and ended up in this one. So the fact they ended up in Badger, I think, is somewhat comforting. But I think it'd be helpful to know what their decision-making process
Sure.
was.
We could do that, reach out to them.
And honestly, the more information we have, the better,
Yeah.
because we want to provide the best level of service that we can. And so if in our research and you guys test some other meters, all of a sudden we find one it's the golden ticket, well, we're going to be interested in it too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So motion and second.
It's been done.
Okay. I think the only way I'd amend the motion is just saying that the city council also pursues evaluating other options, kind of parallel with the test program. But if y'all are okay with that amendment to it, vote on it. Aye.
Aye.
Give it,
Fire hose, we'll talk about those.
Sure, let's go
we'll make
to
sure.
Off.
number
Council
4,
meeting tomorrow.
Chairman.
This is,
Agenda item number 4, Chairman, if we could.
Oh,
pull
yeah,
that up, please.
sorry.
Okay.
Item number 4 is a discussion and possible action on a recommendation to City Council regarding a proposal from AWR for testing and painting of fire hydrants.
We have copies of those proposals if you'd like a physical copy.
Got it.
I have one.
Before we get to that point of order, perhaps, on point 3, there was also a strategy to decommission abandoned water lines. Is that something to be taken up at this presentation?
Be glad to address that also. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to talk
Yeah,
about
please.
fire hydrants first, or?
Yep.
Yeah, okay,
Let's talk about the strategy for decommissioning abandoned water lines first.
Water lines.
Water line, oh, sure. So those water lines are located, of course, on residential property in many cases, at least people think it's their property. They're difficult to find, disturbs the landscape. And so AWR itself is really a repair company. When we have a problem with a water line, or we have a problem, with a sewer line, and your city staff calls and say, we've got a big problem over here. We have contractors and also our staff that are knowledgeable in repairing those lines. So we have backhoes to come in and can excavate, even cut into streets when necessary. I think we've done it many times here. I think we've been working for 16 years or something. So whatever can happen will happen. I said to Amber that I believe the best option for you is to have, and talk to the engineer, is to specify where those lines are generally and have a contractor come in and do that work. A regular utility contractor, that's what they do. They dig up lines, they install new lines, they have crews that do that. I think that's the most cost-effective way to do it. We have a Schedule A hourly rate schedule and a contractor set up. It isn't that we want to turn down work, but at the same time, we try to do the right thing for our clients, and I think you're better off and will spend less money with a real live contractor that just does construction work. So that's kind of what we've talked about. The engineer, I think, is working on that, right? A set of specifications or an RFP to submit to some contractors out here. One thing I will tell you is this town is really busy. All the contractors are busy. All the suppliers are busy. We fortunately have long-term relationships with many of these people, so we don't have too much difficulty, but the contractors are bidding fairly high. If they're busy, they'll take extra work, but They're typically bidding it a little higher than normal out there. But I think it's a fairly large program, something that a contractor can move in and just keep working through the entire system and get that taken care of. And that's our recommendation to you.
And this may be a stupid question, but what risk do the abandoned water lines cause the city, or what risk is there?
Well, I don't.
Is water run through them right now and they're breaking, or is?
No, and they are. You agree with that, Amber?
Yes, some of them are still hot,
Okay.
and they're,
Mhm.
so they're older than the newer lines, and we just need to make sure that they're connected to the new lines. And then as the construction's happening throughout the community, sometimes the contractor's hitting the line and we didn't realize it was still hot. So it's causing some issues.
Is it possible just to cut them off and cap them rather than pulling them?
That's what we're doing.
Okay.
Is cutting them off and capping them.
Okay. I mean, I think, so we're kind of a waiting game here to get bids back from contractors to do that.
Right, and I think the engineer was gonna kind of come up with some strategy, identify the ones that need to be decommissioned. It's challenging. The gas company doesn't always tell us where their lines are, and so we've tried a couple of these on our own, and while we were successful in decommissioning the old lines, we maybe hit another line or hit a gas line. So we want to be really thoughtful and strategic in how we go about this process to make sure that we limit our impact on the residents.
Y'all calling 811?
We do, and they don't know about the gas line sometimes too, so, yes.
Most of the time, your gas company will notate the main distributions, but there are some smaller lines that we've run into. We and Jackie Bob and even previous to when Jackie Bob was here, when Mr. Miller was here as your public works director, we've seen those small gas lines that are not on a map. And so anytime we're digging, you dig very carefully. Sometimes even take out certain layers and then hand dig for a little while.
So what the contractor will do is he'll call one call. One call has the maps for all the utilities. They'll locate all those, mark them up and so forth out there. And so the contractor will go in and start working there. If he hits a small line, he's probably going to have in his contract to say, we will be responsible for anything that's been located. Non-located lines, they won't be. It's kind of where they are. So the way you find those smaller lines is you just dig right through them, So that's what happens with the contractor out there.
Thank you. So waiting game on that one, so no recommendation needed at this point. So moving on to fire hydrants.
Sure. So your city's not unlike many cities. I'm actually an ex-city manager some years ago when I had hair. And so the fire hydrants just tend to be neglected or not thought about. They're there, you're not using them, they're put in at typically 500 to 800 foot intervals, and they're not really maintained and actuated. So a couple of things happen. One, if you don't actuate them, they corrode inside. It's difficult to get them open and so forth. There's actually a gate valve that opens up. There's a line that goes over and connects to the main line. There's supposed to be a separate fire line coming to that fire hydrant. So we have, for all of our clients, and we made this recommendation to the city of Rollingwood, let's go in and actuate every one of those hydrants and make sure they operate. Because it's really important when that fire department rolls up that they can connect to that hydrant as quickly as they can. Time is of the essence, and they can knock that fire down. If they connect to that hydrant, and there's no water, they've got to lay line to the next hydrant up here. That takes time. Fire gets bigger. So our proposal would be that we would go in and actuate every hydrant and make sure it functions properly. We'd make sure that there is a valve on the fire line going to the main line so that you can turn that off in case you need to repair the hydrant. We would, if that hydrant does not function properly, we would bag that hydrant. That's the term in utility jargon, which means we identify that with a black bag so that the fire department will not come and use that hydrant in case a fire occurs. We would provide you with the pressures on each of the fire hydrants. We check those pressures to see what kind of pressure we have. Make sure the hydrant operates. We would notate any repairs that need to be done. And typically when we're working with a hydrant, we can figure out what's wrong with that hydrant. The good news is there are repair parts that are available for those hydrants, so that's a good thing. Typically, we don't have to take the whole hydrant out unless we have one that's cracked, water spraying out of the casing and so forth. We would provide you with this pressure list. That pressure list could go to the fire department, but the most modern thing to do is color code the cap of those hydrants with the pressure. So there's a color code and it shows the pressures on there, so when that fire department drives up, they know that hydrant's got 80 PSI on it. They set the truck for 70 PSI so they don't drain the system, and they go to work. We would wire brush and clean up those hydrants and then paint those hydrants. You know, truthfully, the greatest benefit from this, even though the real benefits the fire department, is the fact that they look so much better when you get them painted. It's a citywide program. You have 108 fire hydrants within your system. And when you finish, they're all nice and painted and pretty out there. And people, if they know you're involved in this, will tell you, you know, great job. We do occasionally get people who want to paint it their college colors. We tell them, no, you can't do that. So, but in the end, you'll have color-coded hydrants, so the fire department knows where they are. We've agreed in there to put the road markers in if the city provides those, and I think you already have those in hand. Provide so each hydrant, so as that fire department is getting to that fire, they're going to be looking for that hydrant. They're going to see that road marker. They're going to see the color cap in there. They're going to be able to lay hose to that and go to work. Our proposal's, I think, 13.5. Is that correct, Brett? I think that's right. To do that, it's turnkey with the exception of any repairs. If the fire hydrant has to be repaired, then we would do that based on what we call our Schedule A. It's just hourly rates and the parts that go with that. Take us about 30 days to do all the hydrants, maybe a little bit longer. It's the holidays. It's going to probably be after the first of the year before we could really crank off on that project. It's a project that you should do. You should make sure all those hydrants operate. Makes a huge difference in a fire. So if they have a big fire, they're going to be laying in line to a second hydrant out here. We want that hydrant to work. So if you've ever been to these fires and seen that fire department operating out there, they want to know that hydrant operates. They want to know what the pressure is, and they want to know the water system will sustain 1,500 gallons a minute for 2 hours. That's really what the state standard is for hydrants, and you've got that. You've got high pressures in most of your areas out here. You've got good, strong water supply. You can fight a big fire. You want to get that house out. If you're losing that house, you want to go defensive and protect the houses on each side of it. But it's we've had fires in our districts. I don't know, in the last 5 years, we've had maybe 2 or 3, you know, out of some 16 utilities. And it's a horrific situation. I'm telling you, it's just awful.
Well, we had
So-
one in Rollingwood not a year ago, probably.
How'd our hydrants do?
I think fine. In that location, it was on Inwood.
I love an Inwood.
So is there a recommended maintenance program for hydrants, like flushing them once a year or something like that? And we've been doing that, or is that?
We recommend once you do this, that every 5 years you go through your hydrants again and check those hydrants. You won't have to paint them, probably won't have to repair too many of them, but you want to actuate them and let them run and operate a little bit. So you probably have some hydrants here that are.
I don't know that you had an existing rotation on your maintenance plan.
And the fire department hasn't been doing that either, as far as you know?
No, well, mainly because you're, so you have City of Austin, Westlake Fire Department.
So
Westlake.
Fire
You have
District
Westlake
one.
Fire Department.
Travis County
Yeah,
District.
ESD.
Okay, Travis County ESD.
Yeah.
Okay, so, that's Chief Whittig, isn't it?
No,
Oh, Michael Lacey.
he's
Okay.
the fire
Yeah,
marshal.
we have worked with Michael Lacey actually on the one on Casaba. And so they do like to do color coding. They don't do your maintenance on your hydrants, but the people that we work with are off-duty firemen, and they actually know Westlake Fire Department ESD3, and so I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if these hydrants have ever been checked, painted, and repaired, to be truthful. At least the best of we've been here 16 years, I've never seen it done in that time period. And truthfully, it's not unusual. They just sort of are there and no one really pays much attention to them. But boy, when you have a fire truck roll up, you want that hydrant to work.
Somehow I have a memory of something like this occurred.
We have done some,
five-
I mean, we did some testing, because that's how we figured out where else we needed to add hydrants and what the pressures were and all that. So we have done some work on it's been a while, and they have been painted too.
I think it's at least 5 years.
It's probably been more than 5 years, but yeah.
Yeah, and I doubt that all of them have been looked at. That's not normal for that to happen. So, I think you're being proactive here. You're doing the right thing by the residents to make sure they have good fire protection.
And Sarah, this is almost something more defer to city council on whether the 13.5 is in the budget for this year. And I mean, I think it's something the city council should consider doing. I just don't know what the budget looks like for that expenditure this year.
I don't know what we have in there for maintenance, but I'm sure we have budget for maintenance.
I don't know how we-
We do.
Pass on making sure the fire hydrants work, so it kind of
Yeah.
seems like you gotta do
Yes,
this.
I think, I recommend that the city council do it subject to
Budgetary.
fiscal, Someone wanna move?
Was that an
Oh,
action?
no, okay, I'll move to recommend the city council, consider approving this proposal subject to confirming it fits within budget.
No, second.
Vote?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your
Thank
time.
you all for the time, that's really helpful and informative.
If y'all have any other questions, feel free to pass them to Amber and we'll make sure we get them answered for you right away.
Be sure to send them to Brett.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Yeah. Okay, so I think looking at this, looks like point 5, I think we already hit on. Looks like point 3 was just the report, and 4 and 5 were discussion. So I think we're through 3, 4, and 5. Moving on to the regular agenda. Discussion and possible action on a water bill appeal by Sam et al. For his property at 2612 Rollingwood Drive.
Chairman, he had a conflict tonight, and he has a conflict for the December meeting as well. I would ask that the commission take no action, and then if he would like to bring this back in February, he could do so.
Okay.
Is that, do we have to,
No January meeting,
No
since it's the first of the, but he's aware.
Motion to take no action on the appeal by Sam et al.
and is that to stop the tolling of the 3-month appeal period? Are we gonna let that,
He's appealed it,
Yeah, he's brought the claim.
he's brought it forward.
but it's adjustment of bills for a period exceeding 3 months will not be considered. I'm fine with it. I mean, if he can't make it, he can't make it. I just don't want him to lose because he couldn't be here.
Well, I think he's brought it to our attention and everything, so I'm fine tolling it.
I'm fine tolling it too.
Okay. Second? No action? We don't have, I guess we don't have to vote on that, just, it is what it is. Item 7, discussion and possible action on utility bill appeal for 3218 Park Hills Drive.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for waiting through.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't expect
I
that.
hope you learned something.
Yeah, it did. So my name is Josh. I work for JD Hunt Construction. We're building that house out in 3218. Yeah, our bill came up pretty high this first month, and we haven't even been using water. So I just kind of wanted to see what was going on with that, because our bill right now is, or it came back at $3,585, and like I said, we haven't even been using any water out there. So I'm trying to see if there's a leak or you know.
Have you all had anyone come out and look for a leak? Any old sprinklers or anything that may have been running?
The thing is that we barely got a meter put in about a couple days before this came out, or like a month before that. So I don't see that possibility. Because everything, I mean, before we start demoing, we have to shut everything off and, you know, cut all the old pipes off. And
We have a note about water theft here?
Yeah, that's what I was, there's
Mhm.
like a whole backstory to this.
yeah, well, that's the thing, though. There wasn't even a meter on there before when that was happening. And like I said, the neighbor, we were getting water from the neighbor. She let us use her water. So I mean, there's no way to really prove that we weren't getting water. The only
Well,
way is that.
There was
Wait a
actually a
second.
connection that was made to,
Mhm.
to the water, so they, without a water meter, connected at that connection.
Okay,
And we did have a police officer go over there and issue a citation for that.
Mm.
okay.
So that'll be adjudicated in the municipal court.
Yeah, that's gonna
Okay.
be December 2nd.
But so then after that, then they came in and applied for a water meter. Eli said they had to wet down, I believe you laid a driveway, and you needed a lot of water to lay the driveway. So they really only have 2 months of consumption, and it's been, you know, since it's construction, it's difficult to tell. Sometimes they need a lot of water, sometimes they don't. But we told them this was their option.
Mhm. Well, the thing about the construction. Oh.
Would you like me to?
Sure, Carrie has more details.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Carrie Kaler. I'm the Development Services Manager. JD Hunt Construction had paid for to get an upgraded meter at this site before the water theft occurred. They had applied for an account. They had paid the $250 to get a 1-inch meter put in. That meter had not been put in at the time because of some infrastructure work that had to be done in order to put in that 1-inch meter. I was made aware by Eli, our Public Works employee, that a employee of JD Hunt had tied a hose directly into the line, unmetered. I went over there, saw it with a police officer. The gentleman that did it was issued a ticket. That is separate, and that will be decided separately. But he was cited at that time. We went back and put in a 5/8 inch meter to service the property for water for the construction site in the interim. And then when we were first approached about this bill, the assumption was that part of the reason they received a high bill was because they probably got billed for 6 weeks to, 7 weeks worth of usage as one bill. So we offered to split the bill over 2 months to bring them down into a lower tier to give them an adjustment that way. But they were concerned that was that they were still, the amount of water was exceeding what they thought that they had used on the property from early September through October.
When was the temporary meter put in?
The temporary, I would have to,
11/15, November 15th.
okay.
That was last week.
No, that's when the 1-inch meter,
Oh,
that's when the upgraded meter was put in. We did just upgrade the meter, got the improvements made on the line.
It was probably not long
It-
after
it-
they were issued.
We would
the
have to check
citation.
the date of the citation, because it was,
After the citation, 'cause I
Yeah.
came in, arguing about the citation.
yes.
And then that's when the meter was installed, because we had paid, I think, a month ahead already, and the meter hadn't been installed, but we needed to use water. The thing about,
Here,
the thing about pouring concrete is we don't need too much water, 'cause, I mean, the cement already comes mixed with water. We get it from Texas Concrete, it already comes in the trucks. So if we're using water, it's just to kind of spray down the plywood so the cement doesn't stick to it when we peel it off. But I mean, that's not $3,500 worth of water. I mean, usually our bill is like about 150 monthly. I mean, we build houses of like 7 houses a year. They're usually about $100 monthly, so that's why I'm kind of trying to see what's going on with that. I
The
mean,
story's kind of unfolding a little differently than I pictured it when I read it. So there was water theft, but before we were metering the water.
yes.
True?
Mm-hmm.
And so then when we started metering the water, that's when we got this big bill.
Yes.
So the theft really didn't apply to this.
No.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there a time, like, I'm struggling to understand, like, a timeline would be helpful, or have been helpful in when construction started, what meter was in, when the temporary meter was put in place, when, I don't know, just to be helpful to have a timeline when everything happened, just because all I see is that as of September 25th, there was 148 water gallons that were reported that had been used, but I'm not sure when construction started, what happened between then and now, when the theft happened, when meters were put in, because if, to figure out if this is wrong, we probably need to test the meter that was in place
Meter
at
was
the time.
tested, wasn't it? Meter, was it? Oh, yeah,
Was
That was the
temporary
prior one.
That was the other
That
one.
was the other one, I think.
That was the
had
prior
That
one.
was the prior one.
The 5/8 meter? I would have to ask Eli about when he pulled that meter last week,
Yeah.
what, where that meter is, if
Meter's
it's been
already
tested.
pulled, you can take
Sure,
it
we
down.
can we can absolutely take that meter and test it. I believe that it was a new 5/8 inch meter that was installed as the temporary meter. I'm not positive on that. Again, we'd have to talk to Eli.
We could work on a timeline, a better timeline for you, and then get the meter tested in between now, and then you have another meeting on December the 3rd, I believe.
Or y'all have one?
Yes, they have another meeting on December the 3rd, I think. So if you wanted to wait for more information.
Yeah, because right now, I mean, I don't think I have
Sure.
enough here. really.
148,000 gallons of water is, that's like,
Yeah, but what would that even require? Is that like filling up a pool? I mean, what?
we don't have a pool yet.
that's just a lot.
It's a lot with some concrete poured. Our public works employee did say that he observed water being used to compact the road fill, and then water's used for dust control. I don't know. I'm not making any
It's
claims to
not gonna
this
affect the
this
hose
property
on that.
specifically, just generally.
Yeah, but I was saying there's also some people leave the hose on an accident, run all night.
Sure.
That 148,000 gallons, that's enough to flood our whole, there was nothing there. There was only, like, our retaining waters aren't even finished, so there was 148,000 gallons rolling through there.
There was 148,000 gallons rolling through that. I mean, our property goes downhill. So the retaining waters aren't built yet. So that would be that the neighbor behind us would be complaining that their house is also getting flooded. So that's kind of not plausible that 148,000 gallons were used.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I don't know enough about it to make it.
And I would be curious, when this meter was installed, are they installed at 0 or they reset to 0, and so then when it's red, or could it have been some kind of?
If it was an old meter that was used, they do not get reset. The reading, they start the reading what is listed.
Yeah,
So
it seems like that's the easiest answer to this math, but I don't know.
right.
It could not have been set at 0 because it says the previous reading, which would have been the reading at the end of September, was 2990.
Okay, so they then that would tell me that they used a meter that we had on the shelf.
How many days?
I think it was about 6 weeks before this high bill arrived.
6 weeks of usage?
Yeah, 6 weeks that the meter had been installed.
That's a lot of water.
It's a lot of water.
That's still a lot of water.
Yeah.
It's even used.
Not as much as you think.
I mean, if you split it over 2 months, if it was 6 or 7 weeks, because if the meter was installed right after the reading,
Yeah.
then they could easily get, 6 or 7 weeks onto one bill. And so,
Yeah, and we've seen appeals of the 70 gallons a month, and there's been a leak before too, which gets you the 148 over 2 months.
I mean, the thing that I could do, like I said, we build a couple houses a year, is get another bill from like Austin, the city of Austin, and just kind of compare it. Because even like right now, we're demoing a house, and for dust control, we are spraying the house as the bulldozer or tearing it down. But like I said, I just don't think that 148,000 gallons were used in 1 month or month
Yeah,
and a
I mean,
half.
I think the meter would be more kind of more helpful, just because I don't know what went on the site, if there's a leak, a hose was left on.
I think if we can get some clarity on, was it a new meter, or was it started with, it looks like wherever it was started, get the meter tested, understand the dates, so we know just how many days
Okay.
Timeline.
Yep.
we're figuring, so we can determine, because 140,000 gallons in a week is different than in 2 months or 3 months, just to understand it before we determine the best way to
Sure.
go forward. Does that work? Okay.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I think, so timeline before the next meeting, and any additional information y'all have that
Yeah.
y'all want to provide.
Okay, because
keep
I do
context.
have the ticket. Well, I don't have it with me, but I can get the ticket that was the citation was issued. I know that our neighbor sent a email about the days that we were using her water, because like I said, there wasn't any meter, there wasn't anything attached. The guy that did it, like that's what I'm saying. It's kind of hard to prove that the water theft is, because he only used it for 2 days, the water. But I mean, like I said, I can't prove that. But I don't.
You can't tamper with
Yeah, I
it.
know. I understand that's tampering.
City-
It's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is, and you potentially compromise the water
Mhm.
supply, so.
Okay.
So
But
you
again, that's all
include the neighbor's
separate.
water in that timeline as well?
We matched up they were different dates, so the dates that they approved them using the water. We did not issue the citation because they were using the neighbor's water, we issued the citation because they tampered with the meter and connected the hose directly at that property, not at the neighbor's.
Yeah, I only bring that up just so how you're saying timeline. Just I have
Right, this is all
you know,
after,
mhm.
this is from after we put a meter on, and they were using it metered.
Correct, yes,
We just wanna know when exactly that was.
yes, we can
Okay.
do that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, so then I would have to come back December 2nd or
Yeah.
3rd.
Third, I
Third,
believe.
okay. Yeah.
And we'll be in contact with you.
Okay.
And, just to confirm, make sure you know.
All right.
Can we probably put him first on the agenda?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
First,
Yeah,
we will make
thank
sure-
you. Thank you for your patience.
Well, I'm
So-
still getting paid for this, but thank you.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay. Regular agenda, on to item 8, review, discussion, possible action regarding a recommendation of city council on a change to the city's water adjustment policy procedures within the current utility bill appeals process policy.
I think, Sarah had been working on this with Jackie Bob. I wasn't sure if she was ready to present this to y'all
I
yet.
don't, there's not really anything.
We can, December 3rd would be a great time to consider this.
This
Okay.
year.
But I was gonna say, they already did their part.
Okay.
It was just that when it came before council, there were a couple of, oh, that's not even it. There were a couple of tweaks in the wording that I had wanted to make. Like, instead of saying, the period of time from when the, bill was received, because we have no idea when it was received, changed to say from the date that it was issued, because then we know when that date is. So there were a couple things like that, so I don't think there was anything. Council didn't want to approve it until I got the wording. They didn't like approving the changes on the fly. So we're just gonna, I talked to Jackie Bob before he left, and we got some, couple little things that were just more verbiage than substance, just to clarify what the intent was that you all had talked about at the meeting. So I think that's the only thing that we were
Okay,
changing,
good.
so.
Then that was my misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So, we're good.
Okay, thank you for the update, Sarah. On to item 9, update and discussion on Public Works Director position.
We advertised in the Texas Municipal League, and then also I think on the Texas Public Works Association. Disappointed in the number of applications we've gotten, which is 4, but interested in the quality. So would like to have 1 volunteer from the Utility Commission, and then would like to have these 3 staff, Sarah and Wendy Henley as a representative of the personnel liaison, then the mayor, all of us be kind of the interview selection committee. One gentleman, I think he lives in Canada, so might do some Skype interviews or phone interview, whatever that looks like. Just kind of do some initial interviews and see if they're worth bringing in person, and then, or if we want to open it back up, but would like someone from the commission to volunteer. These would probably be during the day. I would anticipate 30 to 45 minutes with each one.
I can do it if someone doesn't want to.
Okay.
I'm happy to. Unless someone really, really wants to, then I'm happy to not do it.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for volunteering.
Okay. Okay, we'll be reaching out to you and setting that up. So different skill sets. One is engineer. One is a building official, which requires being a licensed plumber, master plumber. What else did we have? But public works.
For water and wastewater.
Water district
Water
manager.
district manager.
And then a public works director.
Yes.
So we'll see.
Is it possible for you to figure out what it is that someone needs to know in order to do the duties of this role?
Absolutely. We'll make sure that you have the,
What it is that they do, so I can
Yes,
figure
we'll
out
make
whether or
sure
not
you
they're
have
qualified for it.
the job description and.
Let's picture
make sure-
Jackie Bob.
Yeah. Access to the resumes and applications too beforehand. So
Did Jackie Bob give us a list of where everything's located in the city so the person coming in can can know
Where the
how
bodies are
everything's been dealt with over the past 10 or 15 years?
I think Eli has a pretty good idea. So
Okay,
we're fortunate in that sense.
losing a lot of institutional knowledge there.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the update. Seems like some quality candidates. So we're moving on to executive session. Executive session pursuant to Texas Local Government Code, Section 551.071, consultation with legal counsel regarding the agreement by and between the City of Austin and the City of Rollingwood for the provision of whole water service.
Do you want to announce the time that you're going
We're
in?
going into executive session at 8:34.
Okay, hold on. We got to stop recording.
We're gonna do